of democratic solidarity on behalf of Ukraine and to counter Russian propaganda. You will receive an email with the instructions, and one of the things that we want to position in terms of narrative, it's that colonialism is not only a narrative from the former Soviet or Russian perspective, but actually Russia is exercising colonialism upon Ukraine. And it's a very powerful concept that we can elaborate more. So as I said, in the email that you will receive more instructions. If you want to join this initiative, if you are an academic, you could write about that. If you are a journalist, if you are a civil society member, or just any person that wants to join this network. And we will share some more specific ideas about this network. Video ready, wonderful.
There has been struggles for freedom, massive protests, tens of thousands of people. Today we want that fight to be the fight of all.
Freedom fighters from every quarter of the world are now gathering in the capital of Israel.
The World Liberty Congress is about bringing together like-minded people that are very different, but we have the heart and our commitment in one word: freedom.
Tyrants are afraid of us. That's why they put us in prison or put us in exile. And we know for certain that together we are stronger.
It's very important to understand that violation of human rights anywhere is violation of human rights everywhere.
We are very happy to be here today to say never give up.
Let's fight for the people and especially the women in our region.
We have to destroy this friendship between dictatorship.
And that's why we are here. This is your conference and this is your Congress. The World Liberty Congress is all about you.
All these things will be useful in the years to come as we fight really what's a common enemy, which is the autocracies who've learned to work together, who share tools, who share information, who share tactics, and now we need to share things to fight back against them.
And now, having here activists from more than 40 countries, we are sending our message loud and clear to every dictator on the planet. Our time has come.
Never give up.
Unity could become a very important factor that will make us win.
We, the freedom fighters, are more united than dictators.
We need to have the attitude of those who have the eye of the tiger for freedom.
Dictators are fighting for power, but we are fighting for freedom, dignity, and democracy.
We are
Fighters
for freedom.
Freedom. Freedom.
Freedom.
Freedom. Freedom.
Freedom.
This is a network of democracy defenders from autocratic regimes. And what we want to express is that we want to invite all of you to participate in a network, and that we put Ukraine as a priority of all of the democracy defenders from autocratic regimes, and that we commit from all over the world to have Ukraine as a main priority. It has been, and we need to continue to do so. So our proposal to all of you is that we join efforts. We have been invited here to Kiev, to Ukraine, to express our solidarity, but we don't want to go back home without committing to continue the work. So at the end, in the closing ceremony, we will present some very concrete actions of how to continue this network and how to continue to be together, communicating each other, and to continue to support Ukraine, because the victory of Ukraine will be the victory of democracy and freedom in all of our countries. Thank you very much.
To invite everybody to the room. We are starting our next panel. My name is Arsen Zhumudil. I would like to invite here Sheikh Haider Rustemov, Mr. Mohammed Fazril bin Mohd Saleh, Mr. Diallo Issa Sadio, and Mr. Mohammed Zaidi. Please join the panel, and we are starting our next panel in a minute. Please be seated. All right. So, my name is Arsen Zhumadilov. I'm a Crimean Tatar. I'm Muslim, and now we'll be speaking about the Global South and Ukraine from this perspective, from the perspective of Islam and Muslims. And before we start, I'd like to greet in this room Sheikh Murad Suleiman, who also joined us. You're welcome. Ahlan wa zahlan, hoş geldiniz. And I would also like to mention that we are now joined by Mr. Zain Maulana, who is a representative of International Relations Office of Muhammadiyah, which is one of the biggest Muslim organizations in Indonesia, which is the largest Muslim country. Assalamu alaikum, you are also welcome to join. Right, so before we start, and before I actually start asking questions, I would like to give floor to Sheikh Haider Rustamov, who is a Mufti of Muslims of Crimea. The floor is yours, please.
Шановні гості, шановний
Dear participants of the conference, dear organizers of this conference, which I believe is a very distinguished event, and I am also honored by your invitation. This is my privilege to be here in this esteemed panel as well, and we're happy to welcome you. And in line with our tradition, let me wish peace to all of you. And with that, this conference, Crimean Global, Understanding Ukraine through the South,
це насправді дуже важливий наголос, тобто наголос саме на Крим.
This conference makes a major focus on Crimea in different dimensions, in dimension of humanity and justice, remembering that this war started back in 2014, namely in the Crimean Peninsula, and hopefully it will end with liberation of Crimea, but its impact on the global geopolicy, which is obvious enough, because Crimean Peninsula has a very important historical significance. I believe everybody remembers the conference in Yalta, which served as the foundation for the future establishment of the United Nations organizations and the modern international order and law, which has been violated and perpetrated, and that was discussed in multiple panels in this conference. I would like to apologize. As a religious leader, I am Mufti of Crimea, and I should not interfere with the politics, but sometimes we are in the position when we have to talk about political concepts, because they allow us to understand what the reality of our modern day is. And without understanding what is happening, we cannot produce our fatwas, we cannot provide for interpretation of the letter of the Muslim law, how to live in the spirit of the Muslim law, how to live in the due manner of faith. So, why is it important to talk about Crimea? And how should we understand what happened in Crimea? I believe all of us are survivors. I mean, all of those who are now living in Crimea, having been exiled from Crimea. We also have been survivors of the Russian attempt to seize the capital city of Kiev within 72 hours. I believe most of you have been on this tour to Irpin and Bucha, and you will agree with my comparison that the slow death literally sometimes is worse than a slow death, than the fast death. And now we have this comparison of the slow happening death of Crimean nation, which has survived 3 deportations, 3 colonizations, but nevertheless have been resilient and strong enough to survive, and now stand in the fight of liberating this nation and this land. But since the start of occupation, there were murders, there were people missing. Rishad Ahmedov, for example, who was murdered, who was assassinated in a barbarian manner. I'm truly proud of my nation, of the nation of Crimean Tatars, who were fighting their war in a peaceful manner up until the armed invaders came to our land. With that, my dear friends, every thought that might come to your mind about some crimes to be committed by barbarians, by the invaders, that actually has been committed by the Russian invaders throughout these days, since the start of occupation of Crimea. These are pictures which I find difficulties to explain. I can't find the right words to explain what was happening in Crimea since the start of armed aggression. But this is very important, and that's why I use this phrase slow death, which is the crime committed against us, against our children. Once we look into official reports, we see the number 210 children whose families, whose parents were killed. But I'm sure the numbers are greater than that, because there are other people who live in permanent fear of persecution, permanent fear that in 4 o'clock in the morning the doors of their house will be breached by armed people. They'll be knocking out your doors, they'll be knocking out your windows. They'll be searching for so-called prohibited publications. They will find every possible excuse to take you into detention. And such searches are taking place not only in private residences, the same happens in the religious sites. And then Crimean Tatars are taken under custody, and the reasons for that are quite obvious. They are well known. And these are the cases about the Hizb ut-Tahrir. I believe you heard about that. And it's not only the matter of keeping people under custody, but also feeding pork to the Muslims, which is unallowable under our religion, and other facts which make life of the Muslims in Crimea a permanent and reign of control under the Russian invaders. Having cameras installed, making records of discussions between the religious people, forcible collection of DNA samples and fingerprints. But this affects not only Crimean Tatars. Mostly Crimean Tatars, maybe yes, but when it comes to religion as a factor, the same is committed against people from other confessions. All of us are well aware of the Ukrainian church being exiled from the Crimean Peninsula by the Russian aggressors. Now the situation is changing, and the Reverend Clement is a military chaplain, and he's one of us sitting here. Further on, demolition of Ukrainian churches in Crimea, particularly in Yevpatoria. The occupational forces of Russia have also committed persecution of the witnesses of Jigava in the Crimean Peninsula. They've been called an extremist organization. And such dynamics are persisting. They are evolving. And ever since the start of full-scale aggression, Again, I will not operate with the numbers. I'm not an expert in statistics, and different human rights organizations and human rights watchers are providing different numbers, but these numbers are changing, they're increasing. So what else should be emphasized? This is important to look at the changes which took place after the start of school-scale aggression. This pressure is growing stronger. And this relates first and foremost to Crimean Tatars being affected. We heard these events when the Putin has announced the so-called partial mobilizations, when hundreds of Crimean Tatars were forcibly mobilized. In some villages, these numbers of people mobilized amounts to hundreds of people. Almost 5,000 Crimean Tatars were exiled from Crimean Peninsula.
But a lot of them has returned later on because this occupation has been taking place for 9 years. There were challenges with the documents, so many of them have returned into the same conditions. So all that I've mentioned now, it was, and it continues as we speak. Now we have this crazy war with the shelling and bombardments that started on the 24th of February and was seen by the whole world. Now, talking about the role of Muslims in this full-scale Russia-Ukraine war, we should point that this role is very active, and we have Sheikh Murad and Sheikh Siran, Sheikh Imat, and many others. Maybe I haven't called upon all of them, the representatives of different diaspora of the Muslim countries that are taking an active position, which is very specific, that every Muslim that is the citizen of Ukraine or lives here permanently has to protect, defend this country, this native country, his dignity. Now that is his responsibility in accordance to the religion of the Almighty Allah. And if he will die, then he will become a shahid. That was our common position. And there was even an application, a request to Muslims, the citizens of Russia who are fighting in the armed forces of Russia, and we've made a kind of a request to them, to their relatives, asking them to leave their units and return back homes, because if they will come here, they will be forced to kill their brethren, and their status is not equal to ours. And I hope that this call was heard, and it was evident for me that this war will about to start. Then there was another appeal to the imams and to muftis, and many Muslims have joined the territorial defense forces, and I can tell about this personally. I did not join, but I was here in Kiev, so they took weapons into their hands, talking about the Muslim militants. There are Muslim units in Crimea, the battalion Crimea, battalion named after Sheikh Mansour, and many others. All of those names were transformed, and now they're called in a different way, because the armed forces is the armed forces, and all of these units being subordinated along the chain of command. Maybe I have not mentioned everyone, because we have the brigade called Karadag, commanded by the Crimean Tatar commander, And now, whenever we're talking about the Muslim, we're fighting for the protection of Ukraine, and Crimean Tatars are among the defenders. And the Muslim communities, in the very peak days in the month, I mean, I'm talking about the first 3 months of the war until Russians have withdrawn from Kiev, we continued to provide humanitarian assistance to those people in need, and everyone here can support this, where it's all these projects continue even now, although they've transformed and they've become more regular and turned into larger projects. For example, the project called Feeding Ukraine. Now, this project was transformed into Crimean Front. That was the joint initiative by the Majlis of the Crimean Tatar people, the foundation of the national welfare of the Crimea, and we are also the founders of this open initiative, and any organization might be joining this this initiative. So, if we're talking about the project Feeding Ukraine, which is currently implemented by our imams from the occupied Kherson region, who suffered from tortures, who had to withdraw from the Crimea to Turkey and then through Europe back to Ukraine. Now they're in Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. They're feeding people, military, and they're offering food in hospitals. It's very hard to do that, but we are doing that in a more regular manner. And we're forced to deliver the food not from the big cars because the missiles are flying on top, so we're trying to use smaller vehicles. Now, the other war during the other aspect during the war, people are facing death, struggling, so they start thinking about the internal things. They call upon the God more often. So the religious groups in times like that help people to find answers or to difficult questions, to rehabilitate after the sufferings, after the loss of the relatives and friends, to start the life from the new page, to see the new sense of being, to become active in the complicated period for the whole state. And this is not just a psychological support. This is kind of a spiritual mentorship when the religious actor is helping the person to, well, to successfully overcome the depression, inspires, shows how to do, what to do. Now, this is what we are doing, the religious actors. And the spiritual leaders today, talking about the transformation. Today, the armed forces of Ukraine have at least 5 chaplains, imams, as part of the armed forces of Ukraine. I mean, there are Muslims. Surely there is much more, but there are certain issues with their registration. And those chaplains, Muslim chaplains, are working together with the chaplains of other religious confessions. They're helping and coordinating one another because this war has united all of us. Other ethnic Ukrainians or the ethnic Crimean Tatars or Chechens, Azerbaijani, people from Caucasus. I'm not able to, list all the nations. This war has combined us into a single political modern nation. So we are fighting here on our native land. We are defending our freedom and demonstrating the world the unprecedented examples of solidarity and mutual understanding between the representatives of different religious confessions in Ukraine. There's a cohesion, utter harmony. Maybe you've seen on the internet how the people like Christians and Muslims, how they're fighting together, shoulder to shoulder. But that was happening until the situation in Palestine started. And we all understand who's behind that situation. That's surely Russia and Iran. And our informational department After running just some, basic analytics, we've written an article, and it's absolutely open. It's available. It's posted on our website, and currently mentioning the most recent events that are taking place in this land. Russia, Iran. I'm sure about this. I'm not a military expert, but everything is pointing to that. The weapons that they were sending, as if it was the Ukrainian weapon, as if the Ukraine was supplying weapons to those terrorists. So everything that was made with the hands of Hamas, thanks to the special services of Russia to Iran. So Russia today is hitting not only the humanity, and this is something you have to understand, because this conflict is related to special lands, the sacred lands to all the three confessions, to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So Russia takes a hit upon the sanity, and that is the red line you should not cross. Otherwise, it might result in consequences resulting in crossing the red lines towards the use of the nuclear weapons. So that is the historic backbone that the humanity can cross without seeing that. And I guess this is happening now. All those horrible events. Ukraine has supported with the words of confessions, with the words of sympathy and support to the people of Israel, because a lot of civilians were killed in Israel, but there has to be a peaceful parity. That is why our Council of Ulemas have adopted a statement, and I'll briefly read some of the aspects of this statement. The Spiritual Council of Muslims condemns all types of killings of the civilian people, because the purpose of the Muslim law is to preserve the life of the human. Even the Almighty Allah in the Quran says that we have ordered the sons, and there's a reference to the sons of Israel. If someone hits the soul, if someone ravages the soul, that is equal to the killing of all people. So the killing of one person is equal to the killing of the whole humanity, and just the same. If you save the life of a single human, that means the saving the life of whole humanity. Second, in order to prevent the spread of the language of hatred, xenophobia, and based on religious, cultural, and other characters, and in order to avoid within the Ukrainian society and in the whole world any interreligious and social conflicts, we're calling upon all the political activists, political actors and citizens to prevent the spread of fakes and disinformation, to justify an unbiased assessment of the situation which is taking place on the sacred lands of Israel and Palestine over the past 75 years. And we are calling upon all the international communities, and other organizations to protect the human rights of the people in Palestine. We're calling upon the Muslims of the world and to pray for peace on the sacred land of Palestine. Unfortunately, this statement and similar statements of Muslims in the whole world, we're always facing the consequences. Every clause of this statement, it's not about the policy. So I don't want to have any political kind of understandings here. It's all about humanity, in fact. It's all about spirituality. It's all about the truth and justice. And we can see the consequences of all this, of everything that is happening in the Ukrainian society. And this was something that Russia was intended to do. We have to say that they failed to reach their objective. Dear friends, I understand that we, the Ukrainians, can be understood, well, unfortunately, only those people who also had like war crimes. But we are people, and we as people, we have to listen to one another, we have to understand one another, that without stopping the aggression, without exhausting the source of the aggression, this war in Ukraine will not end, that there will be no patience, no peace and calmness in the world. And Russia is currently the source of aggression, and now Russia is attempting to prove retrospectively that it's not fighting against Ukraine, but that is why Russia will do everything possible in order to create new outbreaks of the armed conflicts around the world. That is why I hope that what you've seen in Kiev, that was liberated from Russians, in Irpin, in Bucha, what you've heard during this conference, that is the fighting of the Ukrainian nation, with the Crimean Tatars as the inevitable part of that notion. So hopefully that would be the beams of light, the truth, the beams of the victory of good against evil. They will shine and will lighten your path of struggle, as I'm sure that every visitor we have is the fighter for the truth and humanity. I thank you for listening to this long statement. And I thank you, Sheikh Haidar. We understand that what Russia is doing here today in Ukraine with relation to the Muslims, it's not the first experience of this country in the international wars and conflicts. The other war that where Russia has just recently demonstrated who they actually are as the aggressor state, is the war in Syria. And I'm very happy that we have the head of the Syrian diaspora in Ukraine, Mr. Mohammed Zaidir. So the question is to you. This war in Syria, the way it happened and the stage it is now, any lessons learned we can have, we as the Muslims of Ukraine and Muslims of the world, how do we deal with the situation when Russia is not complying with any norms, or nor the international norms, nor the general understanding of humanity and justice? Thank you. I would like to start by quoting our regular Syrian people, the words of gratitude to our President Zelensky for the fact that he was always kind of recalling the Syrian struggle and the aggression of Russia. The most recent time he mentioned about this in New York, and he once again mentioned the chemical attacks launched against the ordinary people of Syria, and if not Russia, and if not for their help, this horrible events would already be ending or putting to an end. And I'm also very grateful to the organizers of this conference, and more specifically the representative of the President of Ukraine in Crimea, for giving us a chance to have this conversation, to discuss this catastrophe and the scale of it. I am also grateful to Tamila Tasheva and your team for supporting the Syrian people. We know this war has started in 2011 with the start of the rebellion. It was a peaceful one and stayed peaceful for over a year, but the rights of people to the freedom and democracy was, well, not supported by many in Syria and in Russia. On the 30th of September 2015, Russia has officially started their participation in Syria. And just to remind you, on the 4th of October 2011, they used the veto right for the first time against the will of the Syrian people.
Furthermore, more than 17 times following that date, they've used their veto again. And just for comparison, the United Kingdom, over the course of the recent 50 years, used their veto only once, just to imagine the difference and to imagine the strength of support from the Russian dictators for Syria. Unfortunately, Syria in recent years had the biggest scale possible of humanitarian disaster ever since the World War II. More than 1 million people killed, and 7, maybe even 8 million people are now refugees scattered around the world. But I would like to focus your attention on the participation, on the role that Russia plays, even if not directly involved. But even directly, their direct involvement resulted in the death of more than 11,000 Syrians, including more than 2,000 children and 1,500 women as part of that number. With that in mind, we have to make sure we learn the lessons for both Syria and Ukraine in this war. As of today, even today, not far away from this conference site, our Syrian colleagues are holding a conference, today and tomorrow, trying to identify how to hold Assad and Putin accountable and how to take this case to the International Criminal Court. And this is very important because we need such global platform to hold them liable and for the rest of the world to know what's happening in the Middle East. Today, in this war, this is not only Russia taking part. Unfortunately, many other countries don't want peace in Syria. And they don't want to get united with our efforts of the rest of the civilized world to put the end to this armed aggression in Syria, to Iran, and other criminal gangs which are committing this act of armed aggression. And particularly now in the context of the armed aggression that started in February 2022, because all of our organizations, all of us as activists, have to make sure that we cast enough light on this, clearly describing the evil start of that. Thank you so much. And indeed, this was very important, appreciating that earlier we were talking about Chechnya, then Georgia, now Ukraine. These are all the lessons. Indeed, these are lessons we have to learn, because now Russia is the state which is inflicting danger and terror to its own nation as well as other countries, including African countries and some including the sub-Saharan Africa. And with that, let me refer with my next question to Mr. Diallo Isa Sadlio, who's spent enough time in Ukraine to understand from inside what is actually happening here. But could you also explain your vision and understanding what is Russia doing in Africa? What is happening in Nigeria? What are the interests? What are the goals of Russia in that region? What are they trying to do there? I am cordially thankful to you for your question. My Ukrainian is not very good, so I'll do my best to express my opinion, and I also ask you not to criticize my language skills, but let me first of all thank the Almighty for granting us with this opportunity to meet, to talk and discuss such important matters which present concerns to all of us. On the second note, I would like to thank the organizers of this event who made sure that throughout these 3 days of work we can receive such a big volume of important information, but most importantly to build relationship with each other. And this indeed is an event which is very rich in content, clearly showing how Ukraine and Ukrainian people want to have peace. And in doing so, they are trying to meet understanding and collaboration with other nations of the world. Also, I would like to explain how how Muslims are living in Ukraine. The fact is that I arrived to Ukraine first during the Soviet times. It was part of the Soviet Union back then. It was September 1986. Back then, it was still Soviet Union and the communism, and at that time there were no opportunities for open discussion, for open manifestation of your religion. There was no freedom of faith, religion and expression in this country. But I have to explain that in Ukraine, leadership of the country was different from local people. Even living in a dormitory for students, I do remember that the local administrators were showing respect to the needs of Muslim people who stayed there, and also the peer students, they also were respecting the students from other countries coming from Islamic worlds. I do remember that in our student dormitories we would be having namaz every Friday. So we had limited space, but we had a room to meet. Usually these were so-called Lenin's rooms or reading halls, which were used as small libraries. But there were no mosques back then, so we used these reading rooms as the place for our prayers. Further on, during the reconstruction time, during the transition to market economy, the communism grew weaker and weaker. And this was the time where business people started arriving to the country. So I do remember the 1990s when Ukraine gained its independence, and they started creating open spaces and offering development opportunities for other confessions, including the Muslim and Islamic religions. And in that regard, I would like to express appreciation to the leadership of Ukraine, because there were no prohibitions established preventing us from attending to our religious proceedings. Moreover, there were legal grounds provided for people who belong to different confessions, and this was the evidence of the fact that Ukraine has a very rich in terms of diversity and highly responsible when it comes to tolerance, society and the state. And up until this time, we have never experienced any aggressions against ourselves as Muslims, or there were no uncivilized or radical manifestations committed against us. On the opposite, there was always understanding between the Islamic people, Muslim people, and government representatives of any sort. I do remember that the State Service for Ethnic Policy and Freedom of Expression, which is serving in affairs of different congregations and communities in Ukraine, remembering there is more than 130 nationalities and ethnicities represented in Ukraine. And there are many movements and religious organizations, including Islamic ones. And I have the honor of being a member to the Public Council of such a state service for ethnic policy and freedom of expression, where people are absolutely free to discuss the laws, to discuss any other affairs which they believe are important from the religious point of view, as well as other affairs which are associated with the life of different ethnic groups. And this is highly positively contributes to our friendship and mutual understanding. So I'm really happy that living here in Ukraine ever since 1986, I also can admit that I am the member of the expert board under the Ombudsman's office, who is the representative in human rights to the Parliament of Ukraine, Верховна Rada. And there we also have this opportunity to discuss any affairs which are associated with affairs of ethnic groups or minorities living in Ukraine. Traditionally, Ukraine is not a Muslim country except for the Crimean Peninsula. But now, in almost every city of Ukraine, you can see either a mosque or a house of prayers or community centers, which is open for education and prayers. And you can also have their community events, which can be easily provided to Islamic people, starting with the ceremony of circumcision or marriage or funerals in line with the laws of Islam. And we have entire freedom of attending to our religious ceremonies here in Ukraine. Our colleagues from Russian Federation say that we have to fight against Nazism and other vicious manifestations. But in fact, here we have the entire freedom of expression. And I have to admit that these Russian talks are unlawful, they are false. And living here, I do remember when the invasion of the Russian Federation country started. Here, we as African people and as Muslims, just like other citizens of Ukraine who decided to stay in Ukraine, so all of us were united into the local territorial defense forces, trying to offer assistance. And myself and other Africans like myself, we also provided different types of support via voluntary organizations. For example, the voluntary battalions, serving in voluntary battalions, it's been a year and 2 months that we are working quite persistently to restore the homes, the houses which were destroyed by the shelling and bombardment or in different towns, including Bucha, Irpin, and similar towns in other regions of Ukraine. And we are also providing support in reconstruction, or at least cleaning of such spaces, and also working together with International Charitable Foundation, Єдине серце, United in Heart. We are helping people in the front lines, providing medicines, providing clothes, medical equipment, and other supplies, which are highly demanded by different people these days. Also, whatever we can do and offer in terms of support of the people of Ukraine, we are trying to do that because we believe we are part of this nation. My wife is Ukrainian and I have 2 daughters, and we lived all this time in Ukraine, and we will definitely continue working and helping and doing everything we can to make sure that we can live further together. If the time permits, I would like to present one very bright example. Last week we were invited to by the Patriarch of Kiev, the Reverend Filaret, who wanted to thank us, express appreciation for the care and service that we are providing here. So we were accepted in their residence, and we were honored by such audience, and I was happy to see how humane and open they were to representatives of different religions, emphasizing that all of us standing in the face of God, attending to our religion, And we are all united by this kindness and humanity. And what makes us human is appreciating other humans' lives, which makes us the defenders of good in the eyes of the Almighty. And the victory will always come to those who stand on the side of the righteous and the right and the good. And we believe that now Ukraine is on the good side, and it definitely will be victorious. But speaking of the Guinea and Africa, the Western Africa in particular, and the South Africa in their impact on the international policy, particularly on strengthening the Russian influence via political pressure, informational pressure, disinformation, which is a very powerful campaign, which is ever supported to attract more and more people from our continent to the side of Russia, because Russians are using such activists or people who call themselves Pan-African activists who are ready to fight on the Russian side and collaborate, sometimes being paid the salary by Russia and seeking other benefits that Russia is offering, and abusing informational mass media platforms which Russia is using to broadcast this disinformation to other people, particularly young people who are covered by such disinformation via mass media and public relations.
So, the other tools used by Russia, that is the military ones, my colleagues who has already mentioned the Wagner Group activities, and this group is actively willing to take control over the territory of the Sahel region and other parts of the Africa. The other ways, the other tools include the following: that Russia, China are creating a lot of, well, rather Russia is creating a lot of cultural centers, and they're kind of attracting people, luring people to study the Russian culture, Russian language, and later on they would be granted with the possibility to have a diploma and to go to higher educational institutions of Russia. This is one of the sources of pressure. The other is the food leverage, and we all know that Russia is promising many countries to provide free of charge a lot of food or fertilizers, and many African countries, they require the fertilizers that they've originally importing them from Ukraine, but now the ports are unable to kind of ensure the supply of those fertilizers. So Russia now has the chance to promise the supply of the fertilizers. Then there's other political aspects. Many African presidents and dictators they have kind of they're standing on common grounds with Putin, and Putin is helping to fund them. He provides help and assistance with experts, engaging on an organization of different activities and organization of pseudo or sham elections. In conclusion, I would like to express my concern over this situation in Gaza Strip. I'm very concerned about the incoming news, but of course we could not but to mention this aspect. I condemn, and the African Council in Ukraine also condemns all all forms of violence, and those who cause this violence. And we condemn those who committed this aggression in the very beginning for not complying with whatever commitments they take. We believe that the rules have to be fulfilled. So thank you for your attention. I thank you, Mr. Diallo. Well, you shouldn't be, saying sorry too much for your Ukrainian language. It's good. No.
You, Mr. Mohammed, and you come from Malaysia, from Southeast Asia, which is the largest region for Muslims to populate. You have so many Muslim countries there with large populations. You all know that it was the Russians who did the atrocities in Syria. You know what they did in Chechnya. Now you get to know what they do in Ukraine. You hear what they are trying to do in Africa by stirring things up in normal democracies, converting them into autocracies. So you know it all, on one hand. On the other hand, you also know that in Russia domestically, Muslims do feel oppressed. They cannot easily obey the rules of Islam. If they have some sort of views of how Islam should be followed, they can be easily imprisoned and jailed. Whereas in Ukraine, as it was just mentioned, we all feel so much free in terms of how we practice our religion. So both internationally and domestically, when you compare Russia and Ukraine, all the sentiments have to go to the side of Ukraine. However, in reality, what we see is that on so many instances, the sentiments of Muslims around the world, including in your region, they go with Russia. Could you please explain to us why this happens? What is the Malaysian view, the Southeastern Asian view of the war that Russia started against Ukraine, of their role in all the nasty things that are happening in this world?
First of all, thank you very much, my brother, Mr. Arsen, Sheikh Aidar, Sheikh Zaidi, Sheikh Isa, and my fellow colleagues. I'm greeting you with the word and greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon all of you. Salam sejahtera, selamat kepada semua. Before I answer the questions, I have the presentation. I've prepared the presentation. So before that, let us look to some of the very principle of Islam that has becoming a part and parcel of our life. And for Malaysian and Southeast Asia, Muslims there, this is a very principle that has becoming the culture as well as our ethos about the karama insaniyah, the human dignity, ukhuwah, brotherhood, and also amal salihat, which is charity, good deeds. So in Islam, we believe in the principle of human dignity, which is universal. And dignity is inalienable rights of all mankind. Peace is ultimately important to ensure that the dignity can be upheld. That is because if during wartime violence occurs, fightings happen, there will be no dignity. Even whatever you said about applying and abide by the law of war, etc., but human dignity will be not upheld during the wartime. Number two, the principle of brotherhood. That is why in my country, in our region, which is Southeast Asia, that fortunately we have not having this kind of experience being colonized by the Russia, as well as the Chinese, but we have besides. So unfortunately, we have been colonized by the Western people. Brotherhood is something that very much into our culture. And when we see about the Muslim brotherhood, I mean the Ukhuwah Islamiyah, the sense of belonging, the sense of brotherhood among Muslims, even though we are in the region that are, we can say, great, what we call it as geographically distance, far away from the Middle East. But what's happened in the Middle East is very, very near to our heart. That is why you can see the struggle and plight of the Palestinian people is the #1 priority in our region. I have to say it straight that Malaysia, Indonesia, and all Southeast Asian countries, we have this kind of ZOP fund, what we call it as a zone of peace, freedom, and neutrality. This is the very principle of regionalism in Southeast Asia, the ASEAN ZOP fund. So maybe because of we are small countries, as some of the Indonesia, once Indonesia has propagate the policy of Ganyang Malaysia, which is destroy Malaysia during the confrontation in 1963. But Alhamdulillah, thanks God, today I'm married to a daughter of an Indonesian citizen. No, that's a long story, long time ago. But even though we have this ZOP fund principle policy in our region, but when it comes to the Palestinian issues, we take a side. I mean, we take side, and we support staunch. We are becoming the staunch supporters of the Palestinian people. Don't get me wrong, because what's happened in Palestine is one of the most tragic crises in the Muslim and also the humanity throughout these centuries. It has happened more than 7 decades, and the conflict has not been resolved until today. So that's, that is why Muslims in our part of country, I mean, in our region, are very near to this, whether it is Palestine, Afghanistan, and previously we are, I mean, when we have this kind of policy, ZOP fund, but when we are using this neutrality card, we manage to lobby and also to advocate the issue of Bosnia during Bosnian War in 1990s, and also the Kosovo War, and during the Syrian War. And the humanitarian side is very important, and we have teams from NGOs to send humanitarian helps to more than 10 countries, Muslim countries especially, and other countries all around the globe. So, okay, we go to brotherhood. Not only Muslim brotherhood, but also brotherhood in humanity, which is not only Ukhuwah Islamiyah, but also Ukhuwah Bashariyah. Because of the first principle that I have told you, I've conveyed to you just now, the principle of human dignity. Number three, this is very important because of that two principles. We have that another principle, which is amal salihat, good deeds, helping others. Thanks God the Almighty that our country, my country, Malaysia, which consists of the population of 32 million people, is peaceful, relatively, in terms of there is no humanitarian conflicts, as well as we are in what we call it as outside the Pacific fire ring, you know. That means we are peace. There is no such thing as tsunami or volcano eruption or earthquake happen in our country. But it will be happen in Philippines, our neighbor, and also in Indonesia, and also in any other neighboring countries. That is why we are thinking of, thank you, our neighbors, because you are the protector, the shield of our country. Once something happened there in Indonesia, something happened in the Philippines, Malaysian will be the first who sending the humanitarian mission there because of this factor. Because, yes, our peaceful country actually happened for reasons. And this is our responsibility. That is same happens when other countries outside Malaysia, Syria, in the Palestine, in Ukraine, in Afghanistan, happen to have this kind of conflict. In the Africa, in the Sahel area, happen to have this kind of conflicts, humanitarian crises. It is our responsibility to send humanitarian mission there to help them. Because one day, God forbid, if anything happened to our country, every minute is very important, and we are hoping that every minute we pray to God, God will send the helper to us. And we know very much, even we are peaceful relatively, but we know how do they feel all around the globe, waiting for the helpers to come, waiting for the humanitarian to come to help them. And these three principles are the principles and ethos of the people in Southeast Asia, not even only in Malaysia, but also in ASEAN. You see the graph, and you can see 2023, more than 300 million people need humanitarian help worldwide, and it will more and more to come in the recent years. And we can see also the conflict in the world, in the countries that now in trapped in the humanitarian crisis, need a long duration to solve the conflict. And it's happened, and it will be happen recently. This is the map of Muslim countries and Muslim majority countries. You can see where Malaysia is, and Malaysia and Indonesia, and also the southeastern countries, Southeast Asia countries. We are living in the eastern part. Actually, during previous time, during the colonial times, the imperialists or colonialists, they tend to perceive us as the lesser India. That's why Indonesian got the name Indonesia. That means comes from the Indian, Indo, and Nesia, Nisos, the islands. So actually, we are very much happy that we gain benefit from the Indian civilization, but we are not Indian. We are Austronesia. We are actually kind of people who live in this kind of region, which are surrounded by sea. We are the sea people. And our siblings are also living in parts of Pacific, the islands, small islands in Micronesia, in Melanesia, etc., etc. So by geography, we are also quite far from the Middle East, actually. But our people are very devoted to their religion and the very principle of the religion. No? Not just having the sentiment, but practicing religion as it is, as what has been taught by our prophet, peace be upon him, as what been taught by the Quran, by the Holy Scripture. So that is why we are promoting peace, number one, because this is the principle of man. Violence is not normal. And we feel that we are happy to be living, conducting our day life and life in our countries, which is peaceful, and becoming our responsibility to promote peace all around the globe. Okay, what is happening in Russia-Ukraine conflict and our response? I would go it quickly. Actually, based on research, what's happened here has a very low in percentage of the weightage of the that attracting the people, what we call it as response. That's number one. Number two, there is no Islamic questions that people know about the conflict, which is, we do have it. Crimean people, Crimean Tatar is our brother, and they need help. Number three, the feeling of anti-Western, anti-West is so much in our country. Maybe because I have told you just now, we have no experience of being colonized by Russian or Chinese. Rather, we have been colonized by the Western people, the Dutch, the British, the American, the Spaniard, etc., Portuguese, etc., etc. This kind of, you see, it is also really suspected that there is a line of thinking in Malaysia and Indonesia and also in Southeast Asia country, as well as the Muslim world, that coming out of criticizing Russia means supporting the West. So that is why also I've told you just now, such perspective of Islamophobia, and we can see in the news today in America, a boy has been killed out of the Islamophobic action. A Muslim boy has been killed in America because of this kind of perception and sentiments, Islamophobia in America and the Western world. So, what about the Crimean Tatars? They are native of the Crimean region of Ukraine, and this happened at the very beginning of the conflict, which is in 2014. And what's happened in 2014 that related to Malaysia? Our aircraft has been shot in the eastern part of Ukraine and has killed 298 people. Most of them are Dutch nationals and Malaysians, and more than 50 families were there in the aircraft. More than 80 people are children under 18 years old. And one family of two couples with 4 kids come from my hometown, And Alhamdulillah, thanks God, maybe there are wisdom behind that. In our country, we built a mosque, a masjid for remembering in the MH17, we call it MH17, the aircraft. MH17 victims, we built a mosque or a masjid to commemorate them. And it is not becoming just a mosque for worshipping or for having rituals, but also as community centers. Interestingly, the mosque has been built in a state, a province in Malaysia, which is Sarawak, located at the Bornean part of Malaysia. That is the only state in Malaysia which have a population of non-Muslims surpass Muslims there. You know? The mosque is located near to my house during our stay in Sarawak before. And I just want to, to enjoin all of you to just take a moment of silence to remember the people has been killed during the incident, unfortunately, the MH17 in 2014, and all souls that has been taken during the aggression of the oppressors. Al-Fatiha. Amin. And my last point, actually, this is a real situation that's happening all around the globe. It is not only in Ukraine, but what I personally saw here in this very country, Ukraine has shown us the strategy. How do we get the support from the world? How do we can use, and also maybe we can modify it from what Ukraine has done to get support, to make it a full stop in the country that has humanitarian crisis that has no end until today, especially in the Muslim world. And I hope that I have something to be conveyed after this. What are we going to do to get support from the global Muslim in the second round? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's really helpful to see the perspective of those people who we don't really get to talk a lot to. It's really helpful. The only thing is that I'm afraid that we're running out of time. You all are brilliant speakers, and it took us more than 1 hour to go through the first round. So having said this, I'd like to open the floor for just 2 questions from guests. If there is anybody who would like to ask a question, please raise your hand, and the floor will be yours. Yes, please, a gentleman at the back bench. And it will be the only one, and Pan Alexei would like to ask a question as well. Okay. Right, you will all have 1 minute each for your closing remarks, if that's all right, okay?
Good afternoon, Igor Berlyan, analyst, Detector Media. Thanks a lot for very insightful discussion. I have a question about Islam. How we can use Islam factor in Ukrainian public and cultural diplomacy, particularly in Southeast Asia and Africa?
Looks like the question goes to you, Mohammed, how we can use, how we in Ukraine can use Islam and the fact that there are Muslims here who live peacefully in terms of how we advocate for the Ukrainian cause in this war against Russia.
Yeah, interestingly, just a fact. In our country, you will see a lot of people with the name Muhammad at the first, you know. You ask me, Muhammad, Muhammad. Another people are also Muhammad. Muhammad what? Muhammad this, Muhammad that. Yeah. And we have in our name bin with the name of our father. So that's number one. Number two, this is just a fact before I answer the question. I'm coming from the organization which is ABIM, Muslim Youth Movement of Malaysia. The acronym is ABIM. And interestingly, the very word ABIM has something to do with the Tatar Crimean Muslim, the language, and also the Turkic related and family language, which mean my brother. And yes, we are your brother. Thank you very much for the questions. I have just three ways. How do we maneuver the Islamic factor to get support from the global Muslim world? Number one, narrative. How to make the narrative that Ukrainian and Ukraine has never becoming a colonial power before and never has oppressed other. That's number one. And Muslim in Ukraine, especially the Crimean Tatars, are under oppression. And the victory of Crimea is actually the victory of Ukraine. So you are on the right track, actually. This is Crimea Platform, Crimea Global, and this is the right track for getting support from the global Muslim. Number two, advocacy. How do we pursue scalable advocacy through sustainable strategies that is promoting the Crimean Tatars, cultures and history, and seek Muslim solidarity? In our country, I have told you, I conveyed to you just now that in our experience, yes, our experience, we are very much near to the conflict of the Muslim world, but not in Crimea Tatar maybe because of the information has not coming to us. So we have to go for more for that advocacy. And the last one, attaining support by using this Crimea Global and having Tatar Muslims representative constantly meeting with the representative of the Muslims, NGOs and civil society, as well as parliamentarians all around the globe. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Пане Олексію, у вас є питання?
Thank you so much, dear Alexei. I believe you also had a question. Could we have the microphone, please?
Shukran. Terima kasih banyak-banyak. Sagolumnis. My comment is about anti-Western feelings in the Muslim world. I know about it, but I think it's important of us also to remind that the thesis that Russia is a friend of Islam is totally wrong. Just remember what country started invasion in neutral Afghanistan. What country? Who started the war in 1979? What country committed huge bloodshed of Muslims in Chechnya, in Aleppo, in other countries? And finally, I believe it wasn't mentioned during this panel, that the war we have right now between Russia and Ukraine, what Russia is doing, Russia is mobilizing Muslims from underdeveloped Muslim regions of Russia. Okay, not from Moscow, not from St. Petersburg, but from underdeveloped regions. A lot of them are Muslim, and they are sending Muslims to Ukraine to kill their Muslim brothers. So that's very important to remember, that Russia is organizing the fight between Muslims themselves. Thank you. Shukran.
Thank you so much for this remark, Professor. Now we go for the last round of questions. Будь ласка, по одній хвилині.
And now can we have the closing comments, please, and maybe your feedback on any of the comments before. So your final statement, final observations as per results of this panel. Over to you. Can you hear me well? Well, let my closing remark be a reply to the first question from the participants about the way to use Islam in diplomacy. We do not have to use, we cannot use any religion in politics. That's exactly what Russia is making. Any religion is seeking the good, the faith, the humanity, not politics. So we don't have to confuse politics and religions. We have to manifest our solidarity, and this is my message to my brothers, whether this is Oriental world, African world, or European world. We have to be on the side of the truth and true faith. There's nothing preventing me from saying the truth. Now, President Zelensky has supported Israel, remembering what's happening in Palestine. But if I have an alternative opinion, I can criticize the president of the country where I live in, because there is freedom. We are asking you about solidarity. Let us make sure that solidarity is equal to faithfulness. Secondly, what are we doing to support our brothers in Palestine? We definitely have to do more. Thank you, dear Mufti. Mr. Mohammed, please take the floor. Thank you so much. Finishing this panel, I would like to emphasize that the Arabic diaspora, even if you call it minority in Ukraine, we never suffered any kind of repression of our rights. We have always enjoyed the freedom of expressing our opinion. As Mufti suggested, there can be different opinions freely expressed in a democratic country. I have to emphasize that the official Kyiv, over 30 years of Ukraine being independent, when it comes to Middle East conflicts, has been clearly taking a position for peaceful resolution in either Middle East conflicts or elsewhere in the world. And we would like to make sure that such position is strongly manifested by the officials and everybody else. Because we as Muslims in Ukraine and Arabic people in Ukraine, we cannot stay aside from what is happening in the Gaza sector, in Palestine and elsewhere in the world. This is really painful to see what's happening there. 75 years, Israel is failing in delivering against our resolutions for peaceful litigation of relationship between Arabs and Israelis, despite having the UN declarations. Yes, we are all seeking peace, but here I also might share a couple of comments regarding Crimea, because that is also in the heart of every Muslim person. But I would like to suggest that there should be more Crimean Tatars included into every official delegation of Ukraine, visiting other countries and delivering our opinion, our vision of the fact, our perspective and solutions we'd like to suggest for the rest of the world, making sure they understand this appropriately and making sure they contribute appropriately to making sure that Crimea as well as the rest of Ukraine is liberated as soon as possible. Thank you so much, Mr. Issa. Over to you, please. Thank you. And what I would like to mention here regarding Ukraine, which is the country that I love dearly. At the start of war, many people were saying that human rights here are violated, rights of Russian-speaking population are violated, but this is not a fact. So do remember that. And speaking of the opportunity to live together as neighbors, sometimes it happens that you are biting your own tongue, although this is you biting yourself. But this is where people have to learn to live next to each other, like your teeth and the tongue, because this is important that you work together, because you're part of the same being. And what I can see here when talking to imams, to Reverend Philaret, and the prayers they make, they are all encouraging people in Ukraine to live together, no matter which religion they belong to. So with that, once again, let me thank you for invitation to this event, and I would like also to take advantage of this opportunity to express appreciation on behalf of the African Council in Ukraine and to award the organizers of this event with a letter of appreciation, and particularly the standing representative of the President of Ukraine in Republic of Crimea, dear Tamara Tasheva. Could you kindly accept this letter of appreciation? This is very important to us as a token of our appreciation for everything you do to make sure that Ukraine and Africa are together, because Africa stands with Ukraine. Thank you so much, and on that wonderful note, I'd like to hand over. Thank you once again. And on that note,
the final remark goes to Mr. Muhammad Fazril from the Muslim Youth Movement of Malaysia. Please, 1 minute.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. For me, Ukraine has done a lot of good job. So like what I have conveyed just now, the other people in the Muslim world can learn something, the strategy, how to get out from the conflict by using the Ukrainian strategies, like what we do have, Crimea platform, etc., and Crimea Global, etc. And the last point is I hoped that the next generation, whatever happened now and until today, will not prolong to the next generation. And we are hoping and pray to the God Almighty that we will be having the generation of peace, generation that have this kind of everlasting peace, and that is the very nature of humankind. Thank you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I would like to thank everybody for your attention. This was really interesting and helpful, and may God bless all of us. Дякую дуже.
Dear friends,